My granddaughter's the one who figured it out. She's 12 years old, barely comes up to my shoulder, and she's the reason I'm still standing in my own house today. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me start from the beginning. Because this story doesn't start with what Nora found. It starts with my wife Dorothy passing away 14 months ago, and with the silence that moved in after her. Dorothy and I had been married 41 years. We met at a church potluck in Knoxville when I was 23, and she showed up with the best peach cobbler I'd ever tasted in my life. I married her 3 months later. People said we were crazy. We weren't crazy. We just knew. We spent 4 decades in the same house in rural Tennessee, raised 2 kids, buried a dog, put in a garden, fixed the roof twice. Ordinary life, good life, the kind you don't appreciate until it's gone. She had a stroke on a Tuesday morning in October. By Thursday, she was gone. The doctor said she didn't suffer, and I hold on to that. I hold on to it because I have to. I was 67 years old, and I had no idea how to be alone. Our son, Gordon, lived 40 minutes away in Chattanooga with his wife, Irene, and their 2 kids. Our daughter, Margot, was out in Portland, Oregon. We saw her Christmas and sometimes in the summer. After Dorothy died, Margot called every few days. Gordon came by on weekends, brought the grandkids, made sure the grass got cut. That part felt like real family showing up. Then there was Nora. Nora was Gordon and Irene's youngest. She was 12 at the time and had always been the quiet one. Her older brother Drew was loud and sporty, always running somewhere. But Nora would sit at my kitchen table for an hour doing a puzzle, not saying a word, perfectly content. Dorothy had loved her, especially for that. Said Nora had an old soul. I think Dorothy was right. 3 months after the funeral, Gordon called me on a Sunday evening. His voice had that careful quality, like he was reading from notes he'd prepared. "Dad, Irene and I have been talking. We're worried about you out there alone. The house is a lot to manage. We think it makes sense if we come stay for a while. Help you get settled." I told him I appreciated it, but I was fine. "Dad." He said it gently but firmly. "You forgot to pay the electric bill last month. The power company called Irene looking for you." I hadn't known that. I sat with it for a moment. "Just temporarily," he said, "until you find your footing." So they moved in. Gordon, Irene, Drew, and Nora. 4 people into a house built for 2. Suddenly there were backpacks in the hallway and cereal boxes on my counter, and the television on channels I didn't recognize. I told myself it was good. I told myself this was what family did, and for the first few weeks it was fine. Gordon helped with the yard. Drew took out the trash without being asked. Nora kept me company in the evenings, sitting across from me while I read, doing her homework without a word between us. That quiet was the best part of all of it. But Irene had always been a capable woman. Organized, efficient, the kind of person who sends birthday cards 3 weeks early and keeps a color-coded family calendar on the refrigerator. I had always respected that about her. But there's a difference between capable and controlling, and I started learning it slowly. She reorganized my kitchen within the first week, not suggested, just did it. Dorothy's recipe box disappeared from the counter. When I asked, Irene said she'd put it somewhere safe. The drawer was getting cluttered. She stopped cooking the things I asked for and started making what she called heart-healthy meals that tasted like nothing. She started handling my mail. Just picking it up off the porch and sorting through it on the kitchen table, setting aside what she thought was important. "You don't need to be bothered with all this," she said. "I've got it." The forgetfulness started around month 2. Small things. I'd walk into the garage and not remember why I went. I'd read the same paragraph 4 times. I'd lose an hour sitting in Dorothy's chair, staring at the wall, and suddenly it was noon. I figured it was grief. I figured I was just getting old. Irene noticed. Of course she noticed. "Gordon," she said one evening at dinner, loud enough for all of us to hear, "your father left the back door open again last night. I found it wide open at 2 in the morning. Anyone could have walked in. I didn't remember leaving the door open. "Are you sleeping okay, Dad?" Gordon asked, looking at me with that worried crease between his eyebrows. "Fine," I said. "I'm sleeping fine." "Maybe we should have Dr. Harmon take a look at you," Irene said, "just to rule things out. You know, early cognitive decline can be very subtle. People don't notice it in themselves." I told her I wasn't in early cognitive decline. But the word had been said. It was out there now, sitting at the table with us. That was when I started noticing Nora. She'd always been quiet, but she'd always been present. After the dinner, where Irene brought up the cognitive decline, Nora stopped coming to the table early. She stopped lingering in the kitchen after meals. When Irene walked into a room where Nora and I were talking, Nora would go still, the way a deer goes still. Not scared, exactly. Alert. One afternoon, I was on the back porch with a cup of coffee, and Nora came and sat in the other chair. We were quiet for a few minutes. Then she said, "Grandpa, do you feel okay?" "Sure," I said. "Why?" She looked out at the yard. "You just seem different lately. Tired." "I'm always tired." "You just seem different lately. Tired." "I'm always tired. I'm almost 68. She almost smiled. Then she looked at me sideways. "Do you know what you took this morning for your blood pressure?" I thought about it. I couldn't remember the name. I took what Irene set out for me with my coffee each morning. "Little white pill, little, round, blue one. The usual," I said. Nora nodded slowly and went back to looking at the yard. I didn't think much of it at the time. 3 weeks later, on a Thursday evening in April, we were all at dinner. Irene had made baked salmon and some kind of grain I couldn't identify. Gordon was talking about a project at work. Drew was asking to be excused before he'd finished eating. Nora was cutting her salmon into very precise squares and not looking at anyone. Irene got up to get something from the kitchen. The moment she stepped through the door, Nora reached across the table and pressed a folded piece of paper into my hand. Her eyes met mine for exactly 1 second, serious, urgent, and then she looked back down at her plate. I closed my fist around the paper. I kept it in my pocket through the rest of dinner, through the dishes, through Gordon's attempt to watch a baseball game with me on the couch. When I finally got upstairs and closed the bedroom door, I sat on the edge of the bed and unfolded it. Nora's handwriting. Neat, careful, the way she did everything. "Grandpa, please go look in the attic. Behind the old brown suitcase, the one with the broken latch, there's a shoebox. Please look inside it. Go when everyone is asleep. Please don't tell Mom." I read it twice. Then I sat in the dark for a long time. I waited until after midnight. The house had gone quiet. I could hear Gordon snoring faintly down the hall. I got up, took my flashlight from the nightstand, and went to the end of the hall where the pulled-down attic stairs were. I eased the cord down slowly, wincing at every creak. The attic was hot even in April. It smelled like old wood and cardboard and dust. I swept the flashlight around. Boxes from when the kids were growing up, Dorothy's Christmas decorations and labeled bins, an old rocking chair with a broken arm that I kept meaning to fix. The brown suitcase was in the far corner. I recognized it immediately. Dorothy's mother's came with her when she immigrated from Kentucky to Tennessee 60 years ago. The latch had been broken since before we got married. We'd kept it for sentimental reasons. Behind it was a shoebox. Plain, lid on. I carried it to where I could see better and opened it. Inside were papers, and a small amber prescription bottle I didn't recognize. My hands were steadier than I expected. I think some part of me had already known something was wrong. I sat down on a box of old curtains and started going through everything. The first thing I found was a bank statement. My account, but a different account. A joint savings account I hadn't known existed, with my name and Irene's name both on it. $12,000 already transferred in, coming in chunks of 800, 1,000, 1,500 at a time, all from my primary checking account. The first transfer dated 6 weeks after Dorothy's funeral. The second thing was a power of attorney document. My signature at the bottom naming Irene as my sole legal representative for financial and medical decisions. I had never signed anything like this. I knew I hadn't because my attorney's name wasn't on it, and I had a standing rule from when Dorothy was sick. Nothing gets signed without calling Ted Kaufman first. The third thing was a printout of an email. Irene to someone named Whitfield, a financial advisor based on the email signature. She was asking about the process for assuming control of a fixed annuity belonging to a spouse or parent who had been declared legally incompetent. She wanted to know how long it typically took. The annuity she was describing was mine. Dorothy and I had put 30 years into it. There were more papers, a brochure for a memory care facility 2 counties over, a note in Irene's handwriting with a phone number labeled Elder Law Guardianship Petition, a second brochure for a different facility, this one in Georgia, and then the prescription bottle. I picked it up and held it under the flashlight. The label had been partially peeled off. Deliberately, I realized. What remained showed a partial name I didn't recognize, a dosage, and the word benzodiazepine. I'd heard that word before. Dorothy's mother had been prescribed something similar in her last years. They were sedatives, strong ones, disorienting ones. Irene had been bringing me my medication every morning with my coffee. She'd been doing it since their second week in the house. She said it was to make sure I didn't forget. I sat in that attic for a long time. The heat didn't bother me. I wasn't thinking about the heat. I heard a soft step on the attic stairs. I turned, and Nora was standing at the top, in her pajamas, her hair loose, watching me with those careful eyes. "You found it," she whispered. "I found it," I said quietly. "Nora, how do you know about this?" She came and sat beside me on the box of curtains. She'd pulled her knees up to her chest, making herself small. "I saw Mom in here about a month ago," she said. "She came up late at night. I woke up to use the bathroom and I saw the attic light on. I waited, and when she came down, she had that shoebox under her arm. She looked around before she put the stairs back up, making sure no one saw her." "And you came up and found it the next day?" She nodded. "It took me a while to understand what all of it was. I looked some things up at school." She paused. "Grandpa, she's been trying to make you seem like you can't take care of yourself, so she could be in charge of everything." "I know. Does Dad know?" That was the question I didn't want to answer. I sat with it. "I don't know yet," I said. Her jaw tightened. She looked down at her knees. "He's been on a lot of calls with her in the evenings, in their room with the door closed. That didn't used to happen." I put my hand on her shoulder. "You did the right thing coming to me. But I need you to act completely normal. Don't change anything." "Can you do that?" "Yes," she said. No hesitation. "Go back to bed." She nodded and went down the stairs. I sat in the attic another 10 minutes, photographing everything with my phone. Then I put the shoebox back exactly as it had been, replaced the suitcase in front of it, and went back to my bedroom. I didn't sleep. I lay in the dark, making a list in my head. In the morning, Irene brought my coffee and my pills to the bedside table the way she always did. I thanked her and said I'd take everything after my shower. Once she left, I emptied the coffee down the sink and put the pills in the zip pocket of my jacket. Then I went downstairs and made my own breakfast while Irene was occupied with the kids getting ready for school. At 9 o'clock, I called Ted Kaufman. I had known Ted for 22 years. He'd done our estate planning, handled the sale of my hardware business when I retired, written both mine and Dorothy's wills. His receptionist put me through immediately. "Harold," he said, "good to hear from you. What's going on?" I told him. I kept my voice low and steady, and I told him everything, walking outside to the back porch while Gordon was upstairs. Ted listened without interrupting. I could hear him writing. When I finished, he was quiet for a moment. "Harold, I need you to come in today. This morning, if you can. What you're describing, the power of attorney, the joint account, these are serious. The POA especially. I have your actual POA on file, and it designates Gordon and Margot as co-agents, and only in the event of documented incapacity. Whatever Irene is using is a forgery. Can she actually have me declared incompetent, not without a proper medical evaluation in a court hearing? But banks and medical offices sometimes accept fraudulent POAs at face value before anyone catches it. If she's already opened a joint account, she's been testing the waters. We need to act before she goes further. I told him I'd be there in 2 hours. Then I called my doctor. I'd been seeing Dr. Mercer for 15 years. His office was in town, 20 minutes away. I called and asked to speak with him directly, said it was urgent. He called me back within 20 minutes. Harold, what is it? I told him about the pills. I told him about the forgetfulness, the lost time, the confusion that had been building for months. I told him I hadn't taken my morning medication today and already felt clearer than I had in weeks. There was a silence. I want you to come in right after you see your attorney, he said. Bring whatever pills you have. I'm going to draw blood and run a full cognitive panel. Don't eat anything you haven't prepared yourself until we talk. Can you do that? I said I could. Irene was in the living room when I came back inside for my jacket. Where are you off to? She asked. Hardware store, I said. Need some bolts for the back gate. I can send Gordon. I've been driving to that hardware store for 30 years, Irene. I think I can manage. Her expression shifted just slightly, not quite annoyance. Recalculation. Ted Kaufman's office was in the same building it had always been, above a pharmacy on Main Street. He met me at the door, and we spent an hour going through everything. I handed him my phone, and he went through the photographs one by one. The POA is an obvious forgery, he said. The notary stamp doesn't match any registered notary in this county. The signature is close, but the pen pressure is different from your actual documents on file. He set the phone down. Harold, this is elder financial fraud, potentially elder abuse under Tennessee statute. We need to go to the sheriff's department. Not yet, I said. If Irene knows I'm onto her, she'll clear out that shoebox and I'll have nothing but photographs. He thought about it. All right. But I'm filing an emergency motion today to freeze any accounts associated with your name from new signatories. I'm also going to send a certified letter to your bank's fraud department. That cuts off what she's been doing. He leaned forward. What about your son? I looked at the window. The pharmacy sign was flickering across the street. I don't know yet how much he knows, I said. I don't want to assume. Ted nodded. Get your medical evaluation, then we decide. Dr. Mercer's office was on the south end of town. He'd cleared his afternoon. He took my blood, did a full cognitive assessment, memory, reasoning, language, processing speed. He had me identify patterns, repeat sequences, recall details from a story he read aloud. An hour and a half of testing. Afterward, we sat in his office. Harold, your cognitive function is completely intact, he said. I'd put you above average for your age. Whatever memory issues you've been experiencing, they're not coming from your brain. They're coming from what's in your bloodstream. He held up the prescription bottle I'd brought. I recognized his class of drug. Long-term, low-dose administration would cause exactly what you've been experiencing. Confusion, short-term memory gaps, disorientation, fatigue. It mimics the early stages of dementia closely enough to fool most people, even doctors in some cases. He wrote out a full report documenting my competency and his clinical findings. He told me to stop taking anything I hadn't obtained myself. He told me to call him immediately if I started feeling confused again. I drove home. The air felt different, sharper. I hadn't realized how foggy the past few months had seemed until that fog started lifting. Dinner that evening was pot roast. Irene made a point of serving my plate herself, carrying it from the kitchen already filled. I thanked her and spent the meal moving food around my plate, eating enough not to be noticed, feeding nothing to the dog because we didn't have one, and I wasn't going to take chances with a neighbor's animal. When Irene offered to bring me tea in the living room afterward, I said I was tired and went upstairs. Gordon knocked on my door at 9. Dad, can I come in? Sure. He sat in the chair by the window. He looked uncomfortable. That uncomfortable look told me more than anything else could have. Irene says you've been off today, he said. Quieter than usual. I'm always quiet. She's worried. I looked at my son, 43 years old. He looked like his mother around the eyes. I had always been proud of him, even when he frustrated me, even when we disagreed. I looked at him now, and I felt the weight of what I was about to find out. "Gordon," I said, "how much do you know about what Irene's been doing?" He went very still. "What do you mean?" "I mean the account she opened in my name, the power of attorney document, the phone calls to the elder law office." The color left his face. He opened his mouth and closed it again. "Gordon, Dad, He stopped. He put his elbows on his knees and pressed his hands over his face. "She said it was to protect you. She said if something happened to you suddenly, there'd be no way to manage things, and you'd end up losing the house or getting into trouble with the IRS, or she was drugging me." He looked up. "What?" "The pills she's been bringing me every morning. They're not my blood pressure medication. Or they're not only my blood pressure medication. I had my blood tested today. I've been in Dr. Mercer's office since noon." Gordon stared at me. His face had gone the color of old chalk. "Dad, I didn't know about that. I knew about the account. She told me it was for emergencies, that we'd tell you about it once you were more stable. I knew she was looking into how guardianship worked. She said it was just research, just in case." His voice was breaking apart. "I didn't know about the pills." I sat with that for a moment. I'd known my son his whole life. I knew when he was lying the same way I'd known when he was 7 and told me he hadn't broken a garage window. He wasn't lying. "What about the power of attorney?" I asked. "She said you'd signed it, that you had agreed." He was shaking his head. "I didn't ask to see it. I should have asked to see it. Dad, I'm sorry." I stood up and went to the window. The backyard was dark. Dorothy's garden was out there, coming up again on its own in the spring, the way gardens do. "Here's what's going to happen," I said. "Tomorrow morning, you're going to take your children and go stay with your in-laws in Chattanooga. You're going to tell Irene you need to go for the weekend. Don't explain beyond that. What are you going to? I'm going to finish what I started, and Irene is going to have to answer for what she's done." Gordon was quiet for a long time. "She's my wife, Dad. I know she is, and she's broken the law in this state in about 6 different ways. That's going to have consequences regardless of what either of us wants." I turned around and looked at him. "The choice you have to make is whether you were part of it or not, and right now I'm inclined to believe you weren't. Don't change that." He left the room without saying anything else. The next morning was a Saturday. Gordon told Irene at breakfast that his in-laws needed help moving some furniture, and they were driving up for the weekend. Irene looked between him and me twice. I was eating the toast I'd made myself and reading the newspaper, and I gave her nothing. She was watchful all morning. Twice she offered me coffee I didn't drink. Once she came to the back porch where I was sitting and said she was thinking about calling Dr. Harmon on Monday to schedule another evaluation for me. I told her that sounded fine. By 1 o'clock, Gordon had packed the kids into the car. Nora hugged me around the middle when she said goodbye and didn't let go for a long time. I held the back of her head with one hand. "Go on now," I said quietly. "It's going to be okay." She looked up at me once, then climbed into the back seat. The moment the car was out of the driveway, I called Ted Kaufman. He'd spent the previous day getting everything in order. By that afternoon, 2 investigators from the county sheriff's fraud division were at my door. I had let them know the originals were still in the shoebox in the attic, exactly as I'd left them. Irene came out of the kitchen when she heard the knock and stopped in the hallway. "Mr. Sickley." "What is this?" "Ma'am," one of the investigators said, "we have a warrant to search the premises and we need to ask you some questions." I watched her face go through several things very quickly. It took them 40 minutes to locate everything. The shoebox, additional paperwork in the filing cabinet in the bedroom, a second phone in her travel bag that contained texts with a financial advisor, with a woman I didn't recognize who appeared to be some kind of notary, and with her sister discussing what the house might sell for. They took Irene in for questioning that afternoon. By Monday, she had been formally charged with elder financial abuse, forgery of legal documents, fraudulent impersonation, and criminal administration of a controlled substance, which, under Tennessee law, is a felony. Gordon cooperated fully with investigators. He was not charged. He has spent the months since then saying very little, doing what the lawyers tell him, and calling me every Sunday. I don't know yet what his marriage looks like from the inside. That's his to sort out. I called Margot on my drive back from the sheriff's office. She cried, and then she got angry, and then she booked a flight for the following weekend. She's been calling every few days since. The legal process took the better part of 8 months. Irene eventually entered a plea to a reduced set of charges in exchange for cooperation and repayment. She'll be on supervised probation for 4 years and is permanently barred from serving as any kind of financial or medical representative. The money transferred to the joint account was returned. The forged documents were voided. My actual estate plan, the one Ted Kaufman drew up years ago, stands exactly as Dorothy and I intended. I changed my locks. I changed my bank. I put all my important documents in a safe deposit box at the credit union, with Margot named as authorized access. I see Dr. Mercer every 3 months, and my cognitive function, he tells me, remains what it has always been, the clear, ordinary mind of a man who has been taking care of himself just fine. Nora came to visit in the summer. We sat on the back porch the way we always do, quiet between us, comfortable. After a while, she asked if I was doing better. I told her I was doing fine. She looked out at Dorothy's garden, which I have been tending myself. The tomatoes were coming in. I was scared you wouldn't believe me, she said. I kept writing the note and throwing it away. I must have written it 6 times. You wrote it the 7th time, I said. That's what counts. She's 14 now. Still quiet. Still comes and sits with me when they visit, doing her homework at my kitchen table without needing to fill the silence. She's going to be something, that kid. I don't know what yet, but something good. As for me, I wake up in the morning and I make my own coffee. I take my own medication, the real kind, from my own prescription bottles that I pick up myself from the pharmacy in town. I read the newspaper. I tend the garden. Some mornings I drive out to the cemetery and sit with Dorothy for a little while, tell her what's been going on, the good and the bad of it. I don't know what she would have said about all of this. Probably she would have seen it coming before I did. She always read people better than me. She would have had strong opinions about Irene and about Gordon and about what forgiveness is worth and what it costs. Mostly, I think she would have said something about Nora, about how the people who love you don't always look the way you expect, about how sometimes it's a 12-year-old at the dinner table pressing a folded piece of paper into your hand who turns out to be the person standing between you and everything you could lose. She would have been right about that. She usually was. I'm 68 years old. I own my house, I manage my finances, I drive where I need to go, and I make my own decisions. Nobody gets to take that from me. Not without a fight. And if you're listening to this and you're worried about someone in your life, an older parent, a neighbor, a grandparent who seems different lately, please pay attention to that feeling. Elder financial abuse is more common than most people realize, and it almost always comes from someone close, someone trusted, someone who has made themselves useful. Watch for the signs. Sudden confusion, isolation from old friends, changes in financial behavior, family members who insert themselves between the older person and their own affairs. If something feels wrong, ask. Look closer. Be the person who notices. And if you're the one who's been made to feel like you're losing it, like you can't trust your own memory or your own mind, get a second opinion. Get your blood tested. Call your own attorney. Don't let anyone else manage every conversation you have or every pill you take. Your instincts are worth something. Your history is worth something. 60 or 70 or 80 years of living your own life doesn't disappear because someone in your house starts whispering that you're confused. Sometimes the most important thing in the world is a 12-year-old who decides to write the note one more time. Trust the people who love you, and never, ever stop paying attention to the quiet ones. I've thought a lot about cause and effect since all of this happened. Not in any grand philosophical way. I'm a hardware store man from Tennessee, not a philosopher, but in the plain, practical sense. Things don't come from nowhere. What happened to me had roots. Irene didn't walk into my house one day and decide to destroy my life on a whim. She watched. She calculated. She found a grieving man who was too proud to ask for help and too tired to pay close attention, and she made her move. That's on her. But I've been honest enough with myself to admit that I made it easier than I should have. I let someone else handle my mail. I let someone else line up my pills. I let the fog settle around me and told myself it was just grief, just age, just the ordinary weight of loss. I stopped being the person who checked his own bank statements and started being the person who was being managed. That didn't happen overnight, and it didn't happen because I was stupid. It happened because I was hurting and I let my guard down around people I should have watched more carefully. That's not a character flaw. That's a human one. But it cost me, and I won't let it happen again. What I keep coming back to is Nora, 12 years old, sitting across that dinner table from a woman who made her deeply uneasy, and instead of saying nothing, which would have been the easier thing, the safer thing, she wrote that note 7 times until she got it right. That takes a kind of moral clarity that most adults spend their whole lives trying to develop. She knew something was wrong. She didn't talk herself out of it. She didn't wait for someone older to notice first. She acted, even though she was scared of what it might cost her. That's what I mean when I say this story is really about intelligence in the truest sense. Not book intelligence, not the kind you test for, but the intelligence that comes from paying attention to the world around you and trusting what you observe. Nora trusted what she saw. I had stopped trusting what I saw. And the difference between those two positions is what separated the person who got deceived from the person who ended it. The consequences that came for Irene were the direct result of choices she made over many months. Every forged document, every crushed pill, every calculated smile. Each of those was a choice, and choices accumulate. They don't disappear. They leave evidence. They leave trails. And eventually, the truth doesn't need anyone to announce it. It just sits there in a shoebox in the attic, waiting for the right person to look. I'm still in my house. I tend my own garden. I make my own coffee. And every time Nora visits, she sits at my kitchen table doing her homework without needing to fill the quiet between us. I think Dorothy would have had something to say about all of it. Probably something short and exactly right, the way she always was. Don't let anyone convince you that needing help means surrendering control. Don't let grief or age or exhaustion make you invisible to yourself. Stay sharp, stay present, and pay attention to the quiet ones. They're usually the ones who see everything.